Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for our joint webinar on how to make supply chain resilience durable. My name is Michelle Purcell, and I'm the Senior Growth Marketing Manager at Resilinc. Some quick housekeeping to start. We'll be doing a Q&A at the end of the webinar, so please use the question tab to send in your questions. We'll do our best to cover them today or follow up with you after the webinar. Also, please know that we will be recording the webinar and making it available to you after the broadcast. I'm happy to give a big welcome to our three speakers today. Our first speaker, Christophe Phillipart, is the Vice President of Sales for Resilinc in the EMEA region, where he helps companies on their journey to resiliency excellence with the support of his European team and an ecosystem of partners. Before joining Resilinc at the beginning of 2022, he was the sales and marketing leader at Opernov, a company he co-founded in demand planning software as a service. Christophe has participated in or managed several businesses from the ground up. He helped launch Lamasoft in the European continent in 2014 and was the Vice President of Southwest Europe before leaving the company in 2020. He has worked as an account executive for FutureMask, QAD, IBM, and Blue Yonder earlier in his career. We are also happy to invite Marie-Ange Giuseppin, who is the Consulting Director for Inetum. She has 25 years of experience in consulting and industry in several functions, including finance, purchasing, supply chain logistics, and production. She has more than 10 years of experience in individual and collective coaching, where she supports complex transformation for large companies. Additionally, she accompanies clients' projects in several sectors, such as consumer goods, agri-foods, aerospace, and defense. We would also like to invite Walid Klibi. Walid is a professor of the Supply Chain and Operation Management since 2011 and is a member of the Center of Excellence in the Supply Chain at Kedge Business School in France. He obtained his PhD in Business Administration, specializing in supply chain management at Laval University in Canada in 2009, and holds a habilitation degree in Applied Mathematics for the University of Bordeaux in France. His research work focuses on supply chain design, resiliency, omni-channel distribution, and urban logistics networks, carried out in partnerships with several international companies. He is also the co-author for more than 30 articles in international academic and professional journals and a book that is intended for an academic and professional audience. Most of his work is carried out in collaboration with affiliated schools and international colleagues. He is currently a research affiliate at the MIT Center for Transportational Logistics and a member of the Physical Internet Lab at Georgia Tech. We would like to welcome all of our guest speakers today.
Yeah.
In today's webinar agenda, we will be covering the following topics: why a boom-bust investment pattern is not helping companies become more resilient, how to implement a sustainable supply chain resiliency program with your organization, leveraging new systems of record, AI technologies to support your resiliency program, and the need to change the corporate culture as the backbone of resiliency sustainability. Welcome, Walid. Can you please tell us more about this boom-bust effect?
Sure, Michelle. Thanks for the kind introduction. We have done a deep dive into several past supply chain disruption, such as Hurricane Katrina, the Kobe earthquake, the Sunday disaster, and of course the COVID-19 pandemic, which have all caused major disruption, as we know, in the global supply chains, with significant impact on the operational and financial performance of numerical organization. What we observed and what you see in this slide is the formation of what we call the boom-bust investment pattern that leads organization to prepare for the last disruption rather than the next disruption. They often engage significant funds in the days, weeks post-disruption, and then decrease funds over time. These observations are based on experience and our current work, as you mentioned it, with my colleague from the MIT CTL, which focuses on studying how to transform such reactionary behavior from the organization level to a proactive investment in resilience. We believe that the journey of shifting from an organizational focus toward resilience is not straightforward for many practitioners. It calls for three pillars. Firstly, an innovative data-driven approach for better quantification of resilience. And I think quantification is a key word here for us. Secondly, leveraging analytics to determine the right supply chain resilience investment level. And thirdly, enhancing the managerial acceptability of resilience action through better integration of these investments into other business processes. For instance, SNOP, BCP, and IBP. And this must be done to achieve the best expected results. This being said, let me turn to Christophe. So Christophe, have you observed these effects as well? Can you share with us your observation from your experience in the field?
Absolutely, Walid. Thanks you for asking the question. So most companies overact the major black swans grounded disruptions when they occur without setting the foundation to face the next disruptions. And only a few consider the long tail of disruption that they are causing shortages or leading to permanent expensive inventories and flexibility. And for over 10 years, Resilinc has been monitoring climate and environmental risk, government, legal risk, social and political risk, corporate risk, cyber securities, and any kind of accident event causing disruptions to our customers. And maybe we can see in the next slide, it's very interesting to notice the variety of disruption sources and their frequency. The data that you can show here tell us about the risk exposure to all organizations independently from the black swan that appears to be amplifiers of the scary background noise. And this illustrates precisely why constant comprehensive vigilance is so essential. Factory fires happen all the time, and a majority have yet to be reported by large new outlets. In many cases, factory fires are reported only on social media channels or by regional language outlets. And the challenge here is to monitor millions of such outlets in hundreds of different languages efficiently and only pick up what is really relevant while discarding any updates about sports, entertainment, celebrities, fashion, and so on.
Okay, very interesting. Marie-Ange, so same question for you. Have we missed other key observation that you may have encountered in practice?
Thank you, Walid, for the question. Yes, as Christophe said, in our daily life as consultant in industries, we see also hidden causes of disruptions. For example, in the aeronautics industry, lots of medium-sized companies have been affected by COVID crisis. Some of them had to face an employment protection plan, and just after, the activity has recovered with ramp-up plan higher than expected. At the same time, as the sector consolidates, the companies are pushed to acquire smaller firms, leading to a succession of M&A activities. And here we see concretely the boom and bust effect you have just explained, Walid. The accumulation of crises and undergone changes with a reactive position makes the organization very fragile. And in this vulnerable context, the slightest change can have a huge impact. For example, a change in an information system like the setup of a new ERP leads to a learning curve that affects heavily the performance of a company during the first period. And as this change is on top of all the previous ones, people are exhausted and they start to lose confidence on their ability to react. And at this point of time, they start to clearly see the necessity to set up a deeper transformation program that will enable them to be more resilient for any change. Moreover, due to business evolution towards more personalized and configured products, or even toward greener or more robust components, the situation of the supply chain became more and more complex, and any change is difficult to address. So at the conclusion, in this context of indirect and direct perturbations, companies need to make a step forward from risk management to resiliency program.
Okay, thanks for this compliment, Marie-Ange. Well, both of you underlined the need for a resilience program. Okay, so let me start here by recalling that supply chain resilience is the ability to bounce back from disruption and continue to operate effectively. Okay, so from my perspective, this definition highlights the need for capabilities, and this capability, we cannot improvise them when the disruption occurs, but must be prepared for or invested in sufficiently in advance. For instance, we have seen selecting backup suppliers, building up strategic stocks, creating capacity buffers, or redesigning in multi-sourcing, reshoring our networks. I think we all observed during the last crisis that companies tend to build task forces to cope with the onset crisis. In such task forces, I mainly remarked recently the presence of data and analytics teams, in addition to value stream managers and also key process leaders, which I think is crucial nowadays. But an open question is how such task forces keep continuously delivering improvement after the crisis period. So my question to both of you is, how companies need to organize themselves to set up those resiliency programs?
Thank you, Walid. So maybe in the next slide, Michelle, we can explain that companies start to activate several levers and organize them in a systemic approach. As a first level, they develop new actors and trusted partnership with suppliers. When there is a need to acquire new technology or a new industrial system, companies can decide to participate actively to a creation of a new supplier. This can be by creating a joint venture with another company, often being in a complementary sector also concerned by this new technology. A typical example is the company ACC, Automotive Sales Company, which is a joint venture between Stellantis and Saft, a company recently acquired by TotalEnergies. The creation of this company aims to accelerate the transition to cleaner, greener transport for all through revolutionizing electrical battery technology. As this technology became crucial for the automotive industry, the shareholders expand also later to Mercedes-Benz. It can also be by taking shares in the capital of suppliers. Another example is Hayes Capital Partner, which is a sector-focused private equity investing in industry, mainly aerospace and defense and technology. Among the investors, we can see large companies as Airbus, Safran, Dassault, Thales, or Naval Group.
Okay, thanks, Marie-Ange. Christophe, how can they know with which supplier they need to build efficiently? Is there any methodology for that?
Well, I don't know whether you remember the Kedge matrix that you might have learned in your early studies. Maybe we can see it on the next slide. If you can, Michelle. So actually, Kedge developed this matrix in the Harvard Business Review, and that was a long time ago, actually, in the 1980s. And as you may recall from your studies, this first axis quantifies the financial impact in terms of global spendings and added value to the sales of differentiation. And the second axis quantifies the level of risk and the complexity of the market. It allows the identification of the items that need specific partnership or trusty relationships with your supplier. Bottleneck and strategic items are natural candidates for a partnership approach. In the case of bottlenecks, even if the spendings are not huge, their impact on the sales and the differentiation of the company may be critical. And the leverage item suppliers need to be monitored as well to avoid unexpected shortages in light of a likely large-scale sales for those items. It won't be a partnership explicitly, but more an open communication enabling the identification of risk.
Thanks, Christophe. So let's proceed. And once you know with which supplier you have to build an efficient partnership, how do you manage this relationship on the long run?
So the first step is to identify the suppliers who are likely to become partners. And this decision is typically a mix between development targets and risk detection or assessment. Then you can create open dialogues with potential partners to identify clear benefits of future actions for each of the two sides. This collaborative project will ideally be progressive and innovative. There are numerous areas where collaboration will bring benefits, from operation performance to supply chain forecast, product design, value analysis, ESG, and risk prevention. The third point is to organize and entertain a quality of collaboration through efficient management of meetings and efficient technology, detection of risk, war rooms, collective mitigation, and so on. These relationships with suppliers has to be followed up and adapted to the necessary levels with accuracy and transparency with the suppliers. Crises are interesting opportunities to test suppliers and to build trustworthy relationships.
Okay, good point, Christophe. Marie-Ange, how do you start to build a resilient center of competence?
So it begins with a visible and ambitious governance of the suppliers' relationship, led ideally by a member of the executive committee. We then move from a task force-oriented organization to a resiliency center of competence. This center of competence maintains regular communication with suppliers to explain their strategic intents and the need for collaboration. In this center of competence, you need specific roles, usually called supplier performance managers. This role is quite complex because you need to have a transversal view of all the functions managed within a company's sales, logistics, planning, production, quality, finance. So to hire those SPM, you need to forecast a reservoir of persons keen to tackle this role with the right capabilities and the right mindset, because they need to have very good interpersonal relationships.
That's critical indeed, Marie-Ange. But then let me turn to Christophe. How do you manage suppliers' relationship when a crisis arises?
So when a crisis arises at a supplier, the natural tendency of all customers is to ask for information about the situation so that they can assess the impact for them. As a supplier is focused on facing the emergency led by the situation, his priority is not to communicate with its customer. And this increases the worry of the customer, who put even more pressure on getting information. When the tension is high, communication becomes an additional trouble to the crisis. At this point, subjectivity often exceeds objectivity, and all signs are a pretext for interpretation. Customers often start to interfere directly with the supplier management team and the supplier management system. But instead of cooperating between them, for example, to prioritize their needs, customers are competing to be first to be served by the production. And this puts even more pressure on the supplier's employee facing the crisis. And we start to have employees resigning or getting sick. And at the same time, the production schedule is entirely disorganized by the attempt to respond to customer emergencies and priorities.
So how can customer help to solve the situation here?
Very good question, Walid. So first, by setting clear priorities in their needs and ensuring the stability of those priorities. They should adapt temporarily their demands to the available production capacity, and they should stick with a stable demand. Secondly, if the supply chain of the supplier is also disorganized, they can allocate material or capacity slots to the supplier so that it can continue to produce at its available production capacity. Thirdly, they can provide experts who will advise the supplier to emerge from the crisis. But here again, those experts may have a tendency to favor the solving problems for the companies they belong to. And as we are in a systemic crisis, those resolutions may have a collateral damage for other productions of other customers and weaken the situation. So at this point in the crisis, the only solution is cooperation. Cooperation between the various customers to align their needs to the production capacity. Cooperation between experts provided by the various customers and the supplier management teams, cooperation between the supplier management team and the operational teams, and cooperation between all the operational teams. And once cooperation begins to be created, we can set priorities, action plan, KPIs, so that the energy is channeled to the right levels. This gives sense, visibility, and confidence, and we can predict the time and means necessary to emerge from the crisis.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to both of you on this point. So let's move forward with the roundtable. So if the top priority of most sourcing and supply chain executive is, of course, to better manage disruption, they would undoubtedly put in place the right organization and governance to transform their supply chain risk management process. But this transformation need, I think, much more an end-to-end visibility than what is available nowadays, and cannot be successfully achieved without a digital enabler. For me to be able to map, score, and monitor all the suppliers and the sub-tiers, we need data and advanced technology to support and speed up the journey at the required level of granularity. In the discrete manufacturing world, for instance, the only relevant level is the part and site level, where we can identify the hidden points of failure and also prioritize the action to make to the supply chain to make it more reliable. So in an interconnected supply chain, one of course need to measure the resilience score based also on the resilience and risk exposure of suppliers, part and raw material providers. For instance, one can build on the notion of time to recover and time to survive that are now quite spread as a proxy for the resilience score, and then prioritizing suppliers and parts with the highest potential impacting the revenues in case of disruption. So we can, for instance, use measure like the value at risk that is now quite known. Then when we start monitoring continuously where the supplier and the sub-tiers are in terms of resilience score, I believe that we can better manage the performance of all the events that can impact the supply chain. So let me turn the question to both of you and start with Marie-Ange. Why do you think discrete manufacturing company must work at the part and site level to map the unknown of their sub-tiers?
For the same reason you have just stressed, Walid, reliability. If you map your sub-tiers at corporate level, you can work on their sustainability and compliance. This is already a very good achievement, but more is needed. If you want to ensure you will receive the critical part you expect from them, you need to understand where precisely those parts are produced and stored. Otherwise, you will constantly undergo shortages or carry over inventory and flexibility cost.
Okay. And why is a new generation of technology indispensable to go to that level of granularity?
For both recording and scalability reasons. If your current system of records have not been designed to work at that level of granularity, there is no chance you can manage the risk dynamically at this level. Without an existing multidimensional view of the risk at product, part, material, and supplier, it implies a recording mapping of whole data in your network at this level. Consequently, the amount of data you need to address will grow exponentially. Only a scalable solution that addresses billions of combinations can help you become more resilient. Otherwise, how can you identify hidden point of failure, do what-if scenario in anticipation of probable disruptions, or look at alternative sourcing when it's applied to thousands of parts coming from thousands of potential tier ones and sub-tiers?
Okay, fair answer. And are there other areas where technology can help?
Without the use of NLP, it's impossible to manage the millions of available sources on internet, social media, newspapers, and other media that can potentially alert you on disruptions. Artificial intelligence can speed up your visibility on your sub-tiers by proposing potential suppliers, sites, and ports. It can help you predict the delays of your purchase order or the pricing evolution of the raw material behind all your products if you have enough historical data to feed their models. Technology can reinforce trust between partners in 3 ways. First, by filling the gap when there is no trust and limiting sourcing options, you can collaborate on assumptions provided by AI to be validated by your supplier. Secondly, by supporting extended collaboration inside the supply chain. If all partners use the same platform and methodology regarding risk evaluation, it helps discover the unknown in your supplier network. Indeed, when a supplier has answered a visibility assessment, he can decide to share his answer with different clients looking at the same purpose. Eventually, you can automate the creation of war rooms when disruption is detected across your network and start implementing mitigation or business continuity plans. When you have proactively been working with your supplier network on this, you can also automate the execution of set of actions inside a workflow.
But Marie-Ange, does that mean data access should be somewhat democratized?
Absolutely, Walid. Nothing should refrain suppliers from accessing the information needed to start an efficient collaboration. Cloud-based technology and mobile applications have concurred to make access to data as easy as possible. Some companies are also looking at calling those data directly from existing applications through a more advanced integration.
Thank you, Marie-Ange. So let me turn to Christophe now. So Christophe, with all that technology available, does that mean that fewer people will be needed to run a modern supply resiliency program?
Well, actually, the problem solved by this kind of program is fundamentally a knowledge management problem. And as you have seen earlier, you cannot get the data needed from your suppliers and their sub-tiers without forming a solid relationship and trust between all partners. This requires the constant involvement of supplier-facing people within an organization. It also relies on cultural change for many companies to build a more resilient supply chain, looking at even the most inexpensive parts and materials when they are critical to product and revenue is vital. This requires a change in mindset from focusing on suppliers with the largest spending to focusing on those supplying product with the greatest potential to cut into your supply in your company's top line. And revenue impact must be the new way to segment and define your critical suppliers. Procurement needs to transform the very nature of the manufacturing side, the manufacturer-supplier relationship, rewarding supplier transparency with collaborative problem solving, future business and strategic status. This is because supply continuity to manufacturer equates to revenue assurance for the supplier. It's a win-win. Both parties can identify areas of investment the supplier needs to make to ensure continuity of supply. And what the manufacturer will provide in exchange, such as more favorable pricing, preferential or trusted partner status, long-term contract, single source status, or other advantages. Of course, collaboration problem-solving team who build strategic supplier partnership grounded in trust and transparency do not develop overnight.
Yeah, that's true, Christophe. Strategic reset of this magnitude needs to be made from top down. How leaders must develop their incentive programs and methodologies?
Instead of bonuses being based on meeting cost-saving targets, incentives should be focused on being rewarded for protecting the continuity of supply and ultimately the profit. This means measuring KPI like the number of supply chain disruption that causes the manufacturing line to go down, the speed of detection whether manufacturing lines went down, if suppliers were overpaid to secure constrained parts, or whether freight expedites were necessary. Those more proactive supplier metrics should measure team for how much visibility and transparency the suppliers within their purview have, how well suppliers respond to assessment requests, the speed with which supplier confirm the impact of disruption, and how quickly disruption are resolved. These new metrics need to be added to the procurement organization operating models and operational review, and targets needs to be factored into their incentive compensation plans.
Okay. And do you see other parallel action that must be managed to adapt technology successfully?
More than action, there is a need to change the dominant sense of fatality regarding suppliers' transparency. You will always have companies driven by individuals who believe that data sharing leads to an abandonment of power. And this should not prevent you to start your resiliency journey, as the majority of companies will understand the value of your program, as long as you have a robust communication plan and a perseverance to bite fatality. Technology is here to support us in making better decisions. We have seen the importance of the governance of a program to make sure that the people involved in this continuous improvement program will remain implicated, in the middle and the long run.
Okay, Christophe. So based on that, does that imply a strong interconnection between supply chain risk management technology and other risk-dependent processes in a company?
Yes, Walid, this is essential to make your resiliency program sustainable. To define what supplier's capacity is, you should book your S&OP process to decide when and from whom you should buy, and when you should set your sourcing strategy, to define your strategic buffers in the context of growing interest rates, to understand when your parts will arrive in case of a shortage during the execution of your supply chain, to take some options on raw materials when you can anticipate the price increase, even to switch to less risky components during the design phase of your product. You need to have access to one set of data dynamically integrated with all underlying processes. This single source of risk-related information can cover all the supplier risk traditionally in scope, ESG, quality, financial, cyber. There are obvious synergy to get all those information requested to measure and ensure inside a single platform the ability of your supplier and their sub-tiers. Hence, you can dynamically manage the sustainability compliance and the reliability of your suppliers in one place, interconnected with all other relevant applications.
Thanks, Christophe, for all these additions. So at this stage of our roundtable, it might be worth looking at some actions that can be set to start to make a resilience program durable. So let me start. From my point of view, it looks like a journey, and we are at the beginning. I don't expect an off-the-shelf solution for such complex topic, because I believe the supply chain maturity, resilience awareness, and experience is different from a company to another. So hard skills such as analytics, data science would definitely help. But I think also soft skills are important to develop. So based on our research and experience, I strongly believe that the support of neuroscience is important to help leverage such an important topic. So for instance, it's now well established that our memory contributes to our ability to imagine future events. So we use it to talk about our episodic memory. This carries about everyday event and less about our prospective memory. The prospective memory is an important one because it's also called the memory of intentions and is defined as the ability to remember to carry out intended action in the future. What this means? It means that if we only rely on our experience, we could easily be trapped in a very narrow vision of the future. However, the more we are trained or aware about alternative future scenario with unforeseen events, the more our prospective memory will expect them to happen and help us to be better prepared for and also take decision to be better prepared. So a simple exercise that I have observed in working with companies, how to shift from decision based on a best guess value to decision based on a range of possible outcomes, which is already a big step toward the acceptance of an uncertain future outcome. So here, specific sessions on imaginative scenarios, simulation, serious game I think are all good options that need to be further explored in the near future. So let me turn you a bit this question. I want to hear from you, Christophe. What do you think about those serious games, for instance?
So for companies that still don't perceive the imperious necessity to act now, at the relevant level of granularity and deepness in their supply chain, we have developed a risk game that has helped large companies measure the effect of fatality acceptance. The risk game developed by Resilinc is a powerful learning tool for procurement and supply chain professionals to master risk management. The game is highly engaging, interactive, and also a fun way to understand how information can help companies by being lean and resilient. This workshop is an extremely effective catalyst to trigger supply chain risk strategic conversation at executive levels. And we can rely on an ecosystem of partners like Inetum and Kedge, to name a very few of them, to run this risk game with their customers. For companies already convinced they need to run a serious game, a serious program instead of a serious game, we offer different paths to evaluate Resilinc at the relevant partner, as a relevant partner, to enable the resiliency journey, not only as a system of record to work at the part level and site level, material level, but also as a system of innovation with AI technology, unique data, and methodology. And the minimum recommended path that we see for making what I will call a proof of value delivered through a supply resiliency journey is a one-year phase where when you have a significant sample of suppliers supported with a strong communication program. And because we think it's the only way that can precisely measure what's going to be the tier 1 and sub-tier response rates, what are the relevance of alert and war room created, what is the relevance of a resiliency scoring to manage priorities between suppliers, port, categories, geography, and so on. Also, the efficiency of the collaboration and action workflow set up with all suppliers, the scalability of the technology to manage thousands of suppliers and ports, the support received and the ramp up of your team during this first phase, and of course, the positive impact on the main KPIs you want to improve.
Okay, thanks, Christophe, for these additions. Marie-Ange, you told me that you are also used to organize hackathons to initiate a resiliency program. Isn't the hackathon for developers who want to crack a code?
Yes, you are right, Walid. You are right, Walid. Hackathon has been created for developers who want to crack a code, but we found that this concept is also very well and very efficient when you have to crack a new mindset, a new process, a new way of working. And here, typically, with the problematics of how to move from risk management to resiliency, how to get out of the boom and bust effect, hackathon is a very good format. We organize it for a full day or half a day. We invite the representative of all the departments involved in supplier risk management within a company, and we organize co-constructive brainstorms on how to move forward to resiliency management. This is a very co-constructive and efficient way to build durable foundations.
Thanks, Marie-Ange. Michel, you wanna take the lead at this point for a question from the audience?
Thank you, Marie-Ange. We are now going to start the Q&A section of our webinar. So the first question that came in is, who should be the executive sponsor of supply chain resiliency program?
It's a good question, Michel. So usually it's the chief procurement officer. It can also be the COO of a company. But nowadays, what is interesting is that we can see new roles appearing, like the chief resilience officer.
Thank you. The next question that we have that just came in is, what are the deepest sub-tiers your customers have explored at a part and site level?
So I think I can take this one. So it all depends of industry, but in the automotive, for instance, we have customers that have explored critical parts and suppliers up to the tier 5 level.
That's great. Next is, how do you encourage transparency between customers and suppliers?
I can take this one. So transparency depends on two factors, visibility and disclosure. So as principals, you need to be very clear on what you ask your suppliers in terms of visibility. You have to answer the question, what does transparency means for me, depending on my business sector, regulations, code of ethics, and corporate culture, and establish precise requirements to your suppliers. After, you also have to decide what information you will disclose, to whom and under what circumstances. And it's essential to be transparent also about those disclosing rules.
Okay, thank you, Marie-Ange. The next question I'm going to ask Christophe. What are the most important risks to assess to get sustainable resiliency?
I'm not going to make the long list of all the risks we follow, but at Resilinc, for instance, we consider up to 39 different risk categories. And the prioritization of risk assessment will really vary from the industry, from the product category, the suppliers, also its site locations as well. And that is one area among others where advisory services are critical to maximize the time you take to assess while keeping your suppliers' response rate high, because you follow a logic they understand.
Thank you, Christophe. That's great. Now this question is for Walid. Walid, what is the current climate for the supply chain in Europe?
Sorry, Michelle, I haven't heard the question.
Oh, my apologies. What is the current climate for supply chain in the Europe region?
Yeah, I mean, currently, I think I just jumped to the point of Christophe now. I think there is different risk categories that need to be considered, and then one of them is, of course, climate changes. And again, I think this is in the radar of different scoring methods and approach, but I think this will be impacting the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 for the upcoming months for different industries.
Thank you, Walid. And thank you all for those answers to the audience's great questions. I would like to ask you now each, what have you taken away from the webinar? Walid?
Okay, you want me to start? Okay, so my takeaway. For me, more than ever, the global vision of an end-to-end supply chain is needed, and visibility through data sharing and collaboration is key here, and I think it has been mentioned also by Marie-Ange and Christophe also. What I would like to add also is the importance of getting an internal alignment within the company on the importance of building a supply chain resilience program and durably engage into this notion of continuous improvement process through new KPIs, existing KPI, and then also action for a resilience. And I think the major disruption of the last year have made supply chain resilience top of mind of many companies. But because resilience is so hard to measure, and this is we see it with current analytics, it's very difficult to know how much to invest into it. And this is important to have managerial acceptability. Let me finish my takeaway by recalling the paradox that we have here. You won't know if or how an investment in supply chain resilience pay off until actually have to use it, which ideally you want. Okay, so this make the problem not easy to solve for the future. So this is my takeaway.
Thank you, Walid. I can give you mine. As consultants, we work both for principals and their suppliers and the supplier of their suppliers And we still see a huge area of improvement in the relationships between the members of the chain. So fortunately, mindsets are evolving, and they are evolving very fast. But too often, the information still remains a stake of power between companies, which kick back the necessary trust and transparency mandatory for cooperation and resiliency. Once all links of the chains have understood that they are all interdependent, they move from retention of information, doubt and suspicion, to trust and collaboration. And at this stage, sharing data is mandatory, and a software as Resilinc offers very powerful AI capabilities that allow monitoring risk and collaborating very efficiently in case of crisis.
Thank you, Marie-Ange. Actually, as a leader in a supply resiliency software market, we have noticed 3 primary ingredients that make technology an enabler of a sustainable resiliency journey: trust, perseverance, and braveness. Trust between suppliers and their customer is necessary. Otherwise, transparency takes longer. It is not a given, and it's also achievable with the most strategic suppliers. It means a change of focus from the one with the highest spendings to the one with the highest criticality from a supply continuity standpoint. Without the perseverance of a dedicated team acting with relevant governance, the impatience of short-term organization will prevail. And you can limit the impact of a current crisis with a faster root cause analysis and real-time alert and collaboration process with your suppliers, supported by technology. You can only become resilient with a long-term effort to gain transparency and preparedness to mitigate the risk. And this implies a solid governance of the program and a permanent communication effort towards suppliers and their sub-tiers from all the stakeholders, from CXOs to category managers and supply specialists. And eventually, the braveness of visionary leaders and all stakeholders is essential to solving the reliability problem. Those leaders and their teams understand the need to address the problem at the required level of granularity and not simplistically choose to tick the sustainability and compliance boxes. They don't hide under the fatalist argument that they will never get transparency from their T1 because of an unfavorable balance of power. They don't use the excuse of their lack of influence on their sub-tiers to ignore the cost of their inaction in more and more unpredictable world. To that point, risk aversion to change is the highest risk undergone by all companies.
Thank you, Christophe. We have one final question that came in, and I want to ask you and Marie-Ange and Walid for your answers. Where do we start the supply chain program?
Where do we start the supply chains? I did not understand the last word.
Where do we start the supply chain program?
So you mean a supply chain risk management program, maybe, Michelle, to be more specific? Otherwise,
maybe, yes. Yes.
I think it's it's a progressive program. So you need to start with what you are actually doing well in your company. So starting by monitoring supplier risk management, and then little by little move, as we said, from risk management to a more proactive and ambitious program towards resiliency. So I say it depends on what is the level of maturity you have in your company. So of course you start with the level of maturity you actually have, but what is important is to understand that you need to go from a reactive way of working to a proactive way of working by little being able to face crises and to go quicker in solving all the crises, which is the principle of resiliency. I don't know, Walid, if you want to add something to.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
from a quantification approach, I mean, in general, we start as most of supply chain project with a value stream mapping and deep diving into every node, looking at the exposure risk of every node, and then checking the financial value by node, and then bringing people, supply chain managers into creating what we call together a team, and then installing the program, and then trying to leverage, I mean, a good team, deep dive into data, look at the external risk sources, as Christophe mentioned, and then you also bring it with hackathon or any serious game to bring people also be engaged in long term into this kind of program. So this is how I see it working, and I think this is a good starting point. But again, maturity could make it happen faster in some places than others, so it will depend.
I agree. Thank you, Walid. Christophe, did you have any thoughts on, or did you want to add anything to answer the question that was asked?
Maybe one point that is also has been stressed throughout the whole presentation or discussion. It's about data. So if you don't have a good way to capture the data, share data between the ecosystem of partners and not only your own supply chain, you will never be able to solve this very complex problem of supply chain risk management.
Thank you, Christophe. Thank you, Marie-Ange and Walid, for the brilliant insights on how to make supply chain resiliency durable. And I want to thank everyone who attended our webinar today. We wish you all a very happy holidays and a happy new year. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
Bye.
Michelle. Bye, everyone.